Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for joining Kat and I here for the pitch development presentation. My name is Kris Rogers. I own Privateer Creative. It is a multimedia development agency here in Moncton, New Brunswick. And along with commercial applications, I also do a bit of film and television industry work. Sometimes it's pitch development, sometimes it's the marketing and distribution, promotion, that sort of thing. So what is a pitch deck? It is the all-encompassing presentation for your project, whatever that is, film or TV. And it's equal parts art and business. So you want to present your idea as best you can in the best creative way you can, but you also need to show that it's a good business investment so that a producer or distributor will want to take the project on. So you include as much as you can to flesh out your idea, but also keep it grounded so that it makes sense for business. So when you're doing a pitch deck, there's not really a maximum for what you can do. You can put as much as you want into it, but there's kind of a minimum basis. It's not templated, but it's expected. So the core items, obviously, your cover page with a title and a log line, which is helpful because if it crosses somebody's desk or an email, you want them to take a quick glance at it and want to open it and peruse through it. The second most important element is the technical information. So if it's a film, you just say however many minutes in length it's going to be approximately. Or if it's television, is it a 20-minute episode, 60-minute episode? Is there 10? Is there 20? The genre, who it was written by, country of origin is usually included, especially if you're applying for funding or grants in Canada. You want to include that it's a Canadian production. Then a synopsis. So usually this is just a brief paragraph. Someone might not have the time to dig deep into your pitch deck, so it's good to have a truncated version of your story, but then include a high-level extended summary, a couple of paragraphs that talks about all the different aspects of the story. Then after that, you have the story arc. So in film, this would be your 3-act structure and all that encompasses. For television, this would be your first season. You wouldn't necessarily include the entire series arc, but just the first season. So how it would begin, how it would conclude, and some of the core themes, and then just focus on your characters. So usually what I like to do is pick the top 3 or 4 for the main characters and go into as much detail as I can, and then include another page that has all the additional characters and have very brief summaries on them, but it's great to include them. Having 3 main characters is more memorable, where it's easy to remember 3 items versus 5 or 6. So even if you've got a ton of actors like Lost, try to pick your top 3 protagonists. It's usually easier to call. Then tone and comparables. Tone is really important to address what it is, because your vision, you might know in your head how it's going to look and sound and feel. It might be gritty, it might be funny. It could be like Shaun of the Dead, where it's serious and gritty, but with an element of comedy, or it could be darker. So you really need to be descriptive for this and include comparables. Here, that could simply be screenshots from a similar movie or television series, or actors, visuals, video clips, anything that would make the reader look at it and say, okay, I get what you're going for. You're going for a mix of this and this. Then after that, include your team. So it's really important to include everyone who's involved, because that shows that you've done your homework, you've progressed. This is a project that has feet on it. So if you're a writer and you've talked to anyone who's looking at being your DP or your cinematographer, include that. Your directors, any co-writers or producers, In some cases, you will get a production company that's interested and will say, absolutely, we'll film your TV show, but we need to get a distributor. So include that production company and all the producers with it, so then you can go and approach the Netflixes and the CBCs and whomever. Include their info, a little bio, their skills and talents, anything they might have been included with or worked on previously. And then lastly is the contact information. So if you're the key person or your producer is the key person, include that information so that it's quick and easy, accessible for whoever's viewing it to just click, email, call. You want to make it as simple for the viewer as possible. Now, I've included a couple of sample pitch decks here. In the chat, there is a PDF version of this presentation where all of these elements are clickable. So if you were to have that open, you could click either of these and it will open those pitch decks. The first one is called Monster Island, which is a pitch deck that I did in 2021 for Connection Productions and Sean Grady. And then you might recognize the other one as Stranger Things, which initially started off as a show called Minotalk. And it's unique that it's formatted like a novel. And if you have the printed version, it looks like an old paperback novel that's been sitting on your shelf for a few years. And it's a really interesting take to the world building and creating that immersive feel for your pitch. So when it comes down to the presentation itself, whether you're walking it through like I'm doing this presentation or you're just sending the PDF, you can do whatever you want. Just like the Stranger Things pitch deck, you'll see that it's off the cuff in a few ways and creative in ways that you wouldn't expect a pitch deck. You can really do what you want, but it's important to remember who is looking at it and what the context is. If you know more about the person who is looking at this, say it's a distributor that you know the name of at CBC, then try to learn how they like to view their documents. If they want it printed, if they want it emailed. But the three core aspects you want to look at is the attention span. Make it easy and show, not tell. It's really difficult to sit down and read 13 pages of a story arc. If you're trying to pitch someone on your idea, you can't expect them to invest a lot of time and effort. So it's key to make it concise and simple. The other aspect is make it easy. So much like this document, if you've downloaded it, you'll notice that you can click links and it will take you to the material that it's referencing. That is as easy as possible. And being able to do that just reduces any friction or any reason that they might not want to consider your project. And show, not tell. So if you can show it, you might as well. Even if it's a clip from a movie that you remember from years ago and it ties into this theme that you've got in your pitch deck, embed that video from YouTube, include it. Copyright isn't a major issue simply because these are private documents, so it's not going to be published in any way. So you can take copyrighted material. Anything that you do find on the internet is generally accepted. In fact, most cases when people do their character breakdowns, they'll take images of known actors that they feel will fill that role, and they'll put their face up in place of that act or that character. So there is no maximum, as I mentioned, but there are a few things that I recommend starting to look into if you're doing a pitch deck. And the first and easiest one is a soundscape. So if you have your show and your movie in mind, go to Spotify or YouTube, whatever your preference is, and create a playlist of 10, 20 songs that kind of embody or you think would be in your project. For me, when I start a project like Monster Island, for example, I actually went and created a 50-song playlist in my Spotify that I felt embodied the soundscape of the show. And it kind of helped as I was developing the project. It informed a few of my decisions in a creative way. And when you go to share your project, you can take that and say, here, this is what I feel the soundscape would be. we might not be able to license all of this music, but it gives the reader a solid idea of the feel. The next option that you can include as a bonus is branding. For Monster Island, for example, I went and did what I thought was going to be the final logo for the show. Presenting that really grounded the material, made it unique, and it showed that the producers and the writers were dedicated in their vision. It wasn't just the default font from whatever program they were using. But if you were going to do a bare minimum, you can, find a creative font that kind of works as a logo for the time being. The next most impactful aspect would be world building. So not necessarily the direct story or the people in it, but what's the world like that they live in? So in Monster Island, it was a world where there's always been monsters. It's just common knowledge. There's insurance companies that will insure your home against monster attacks, that sort of thing. So inside of the story and the synopsis and the characters in this pitch deck, there's imagery that just conveys that. There's billboards with monster insurance attached to it. There's employees that work at these insurance companies that are really bored and just grind day in and day out. That world building really supports and sells the idea, especially if it's just imagery. Additionally, market studies. These, I shouldn't say they're not important. They can be really important. In fact, they can make or break a project. It's not always necessary, but if you've got the time and gumption to do the research, they can really help sell your project to a distributor, because they'll see that, oh, there really is demand for this genre or this format or those actors or that style. And in some cases, there are studios and distributors that will request that you do this. Sometimes you might need to hire a company and it will cost, but if you've got that keyboard bravado, then go to town, do your research and include it in whatever way you can. And then multimedia. So anything else that you can create to support your idea, the better. Sometimes it's even a short film version of the movie you're thinking of making. It could be the branding, but in some cases it could be the intro sequence. So I've worked on a project sort of in the background called Frolier, and to help sell that idea, I jumped right to the TV intro sequence, what the first minute of the show would be, the clips, the music that plays with it, and the actual title sequence that comes up. And I did that entirely using stock footage and music from a platform called MusicBed. So anytime you have access to stock footage, you can use that and create a fake trailer, a fake intro sequence, whatever you can do to help sell your idea. So a couple of samples of world building, as I mentioned, from Monster Island are a couple of these images where you can see there's billboards advertising insurance. There's the Coastal Protectorate, which is the Navy, the multinational Navy that surrounds Monster Island to keep them contained. There's the employee that works at the monster insurance company in the basement day in and day out. And there's the people who have just acclimated to monsters being in the world and the fact that there's missile launchers absolutely everywhere to protect them. These images in the Monster Island pitch deck were just background, and the text for whatever section it was, be it the tone or story arc. It was just on top of it. So getting started on making it. Not everybody has access to Adobe Photoshop or the skill to run it, and that's totally fine. There are a few options that are free. In fact, I recommend the one I'm using now, which is Google Slides, because whatever you create, you can save it as a PDF. As you see in the chat, I've got the PDF form of the presentation there. Any links that you create inside of it will translate to the PDF. Aside from that, you can use PowerPoint. You can use Photoshop. You can use any of the free online tools such as Canva, Adobe Express. And if you're a little more technically inclined, there's a platform called Affinity, which is kind of like a newer version of Photoshop. It's structured in a similar way, so it's kind of layer-based. And also AI tools, which there's a few that I can recommend. Dolly, which is OpenAI's version, and Firefly. They're both image generators. So if your movie's about a murderer who has the head of a moose, you can ask it, generate me a picture of a serial killer with the head of a moose. And as god-awful as it might be, it will do it. And when you get to copy, you can use ChatGPT or Claude. Now, I will say it is best to use these for ideation and working through those concepts. If you generate your image of a serial killer with a moose head, put that into Photoshop or another editor and adjust it to fit your needs, because overuse of AI can be a pretty big deterrent, especially in the film and TV industry, where if it's noticeable enough, someone who's a distributor might look at it and say, I am strongly against AI. I don't want to work with these people. So you need to be cautious, but it can be extremely helpful. Just working through your ideas, taking your 3-page synopsis and truncating it into one paragraph, using it like that is usually the best way to go. And I've done that multiple times just to pull my ideas out through my notes and give me the bullet points. That pretty much wraps up my presentation. If you need a hand with any projects, Privateer Creative and myself will always be there to give you a hand. If you are going for funding, I am Cavco certified, which means once you have your funding, you can get retroactively reimbursed depending on the project type. It's not always a certain thing, but it's there as a potential. And if you check out the free resources on my website, you'll see there's a story circle based on Dan Harmon's story circle for the hero's journey, which will help you structure the protagonist's journey through your project. There's the character diamond, which is used to create an interest around your character. What are their contending elements? What are they like in their world? And then there's a 3-act structure document and a character worksheet, which just kind of help you flesh out your ideas however you need. So feel free to check those out. And if anyone ever needs any assistance, I'm part of the New Brunswick Co-op, so I don't mind giving some free advice. You can always reach out through email or a phone call. And please do reach out if you do get hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding. I would love to help you make your project. So here's hoping, hundreds of thousands, yes.
Kris?
Yes.
Just curious, because I know you've helped a lot of different companies and people with projects. Was there any particular project that was really challenging to help a company with, like to get them to focus their, down on their idea, or it was just hard to get that information from them without mentioning names, of course?
Without mentioning names,
Yeah.
There has been a few projects that have come from the producer before the writer. So generally the vision is the person who wrote it or the director, and they know exactly what they want. But in this particular case that I'm referencing, it was the producer that took the forefront, and nailing down the vision was very difficult. There was a lot of back and forth. I think we had something like 20 or 30 iterations on the cover image alone. But at the end of the day, it was still a cool project to work on. And me as a creative supporting them, I can provide my input as best I can, but I can't step on anyone's toes. They know what they want, so I'll help them get there.
Thank you.
It can take weeks and months, but fleshing out the ideas and testing things out.
You also help people with script notes and things like that.
Yep. If you have a film treatment or any of your ideas in general, I can help walk you through any of those things. And really, honestly, the best place to start I've found is the story circle, the hero's journey story circle, because that will allow you just to think about what your protagonist, what your main character is going to go through, and then you can build on how that's going to look in the long run.
Any other questions from anyone?
I have a question.
Hit me.
Just wondering if you're kind of exploring like more of like a low, like not like New Brunswick to like Atlantic Canadian kind of TV pitch process, and you're kind of just kicking that off. Where would you recommend just kind of like starting at for something like that?
What do you have? Do you have like a general script or a film treatment or an idea, or are you just trying to flesh out your idea?
So right now we have a proof of concept short film to go as like essentially a pilot episode.
Okay.
And then we also have like scripts for an entire like first season. And we're putting together our pitch deck kind of right now. So this is all very useful information, but just wondering in terms of like avenues to kind of knock on and like places to explore, what you might recommend.
Oh, to reach out to contacts.
Yeah, like if you're kind of like getting near the end of your pitch deck and getting ready to actually kind of take it out there, where might someone who has never done that kind of kick off that long journey?
It's a lot easier if you have a producer attached, someone who has worked with a distributor like CBC or Amazon Prime or Netflix before, because they'll have those contacts that they can approach. So if you don't have a producer attached yet, that might be something I would start looking into. That will also give you an idea of what's out there and who you might want to work with. But once you get to that stage, they'll be able to connect you with the people that might feel that your content will fit their platform. Because at the end of the day, if it's something loose and funny, or if it's something scary and gritty, the different platforms that are available in the different channels like CBC or CTV, they all kind of have their groove. So you want to be in touch with the right people. But yes, anything that you can include in your pitch deck, the short or trailers, clips, anything, put it all in.
Awesome. Thank you.
Kris, should they check out the Independent Production Fund? They fund web series.
Any funding that you can find, the better. And I don't believe there's really a limit. So if you can get X amount of dollars from the CMF, great. If you can get some from Telefilm, great. If you can get a little bit from any private initiatives or any indie producers, that's great. Go for it. Get as much as you can. I'd also mention too, one thing I didn't put in the presentation is new media. So if you have a new media idea or initiative for your project, that gains you major points with a distributor. So I'll give you an example. I worked on a TV show called Wild Game, and some of the new media aspects on that show were an interactive 360 website experience where you could go to the set and look around, and a feature called Second Screen. So when the show was airing live for the first time, that time code was sent out over the internet, and you could log in on your phone and you would get little pop-up video graphics that talked about what you were seeing on screen with additional facts. So they might have just mentioned, oh, hey, this is how we do this. But then on second screen on your phone, a slide would come up with those details. And that new media aspect to the show gained them extra funding. I don't recall who it was through. It might have been the Canadian Media Fund. But part of their application to get funding for the show was saying, we're following new media initiatives. We'd like to do a website, a 360 experience, and second screen. and that gave them a good chunk of change to put into their project, which also helped with their marketing and distribution, social media content and stuff like that. In fact, if you can put any new media aspects, just ideas down, I would recommend. If you have a short film about yesterday's weather, come up with an app that shows you yesterday's weather.
Might have to steal that.
Hey, it works. The more creative, the better, because ultimately that's what producers and distributors want to see now is audience engagement. And if you can get that engagement, they want to see it. And how wide you can distribute to an audience. So multiple languages, that's a major bonus. Genres that apply to a larger base. So things that aren't as gory, maybe a bit more funny, more family friendly, they apply to a wider base so that you get more points. Unless, of course, the leading interest for media is true crime documentaries, which wink, wink, it kind of is right now. And if you're looking for any insights on what has been selling, I recommend looking at the Canadian Media Fund website, the CMF. They will show you the funded projects and they will tell you which genres, which producers, which distributors, and how much they received for it, as well as languages and other bonus aspects. Like if it's French based, you get extra points. If there's new media, you get extra points. In fact, there is literally a points system for when they're assessing your program. And you can learn all of that through the CMF. They do have resources that will talk about how you can be eligible to apply, how you gain extra insight, extra points.
Kris,
Yes.
could you talk about what you were telling me about before the workshop started, how if someone is their employment programs for people running their own production companies?
Yeah, there is a program through the CBDC called the Self-Employment Benefit Program. So if you're currently on EI or you're unemployed and you're looking for a little bandwidth to get a business started, I recommend building a business plan and applying to the SEB program. They provide business training and structure to help you get going, as well as a small EI-like stipend where every few weeks they give you a few $100s to keep you floating, and it gives you time and bandwidth to work on starting a new business. And that's the CBDC. And you'd want to reach out to whichever office is in your district. So if you're like me and you're in Moncton, that would be Westmoreland CBDC. There's one for the St. John area. There's one for Southwestern New Brunswick. Just reach out and ask them whatever you can. And in fact, they will do a business development presentation every few months. It's called the BDS. They do it here in Moncton at the NBCC, and they just go through all the basics. How do you register your business? What type you should register as? They give you the tax insight, the accounting insight, basic marketing and structure, and it's free regardless of whether or not you're in the program. Does anyone else have any projects on the go right now that they're looking to make? I'd like to hear about them.
I mean, you already kind of guessed mine, but yeah, yesterday's weather is you were at the screening, so you probably could tell it's kind of ends at kind of right where it begins. Yeah, thank you. But yeah, it's very much meant to be a longer series, so that's kind of what we're cooking up with that.
Yeah, and you covered the bases really well on the world building and the different characters and how they would interact. Jake did an excellent job. He was hilarious.
Yeah, he was a good me.
Yeah, he was a good you.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it originally started on Instagram and TikTok, so it was Brennan. The characters were Brennan and Jason because it was just me and Jason in my apartment. But then when it became a larger thing and I was going to direct, I was like, well, I'm not going to be in it if I'm directing it. So we cast Jake as Brennan, which was very confusing on set, but also hilarious.
Yeah, I'd include that with your pitch deck, or create the most truncated version of that as you can as a trailer. Put all the hot spot parts of the film and make people want to dig.
Okay, so let's say a low budget filmmaker wants to hire Kris Rogers.
Right.
So what kind of a deal can you give them?
Well, if you're part of the New Brunswick Film Co-op, I can give you as much free advice and insight as you need. But if you want to dig in and start creating things, whether it's refining your existing pitch deck or starting one from scratch or creating a fake TV intro, I will start billing, but I'll work with whatever budget that you have available with what you're working on. And again, if you're dedicated to getting funding for that, there are a lot of sources that will retroactively reimburse you. It's not always guaranteed, but it is there, and it's pretty helpful because it brings you more incentive to produce more. Because at the end of the day, Telefilm, Canadian Media Fund, they want media. They're not gatekeepers. They're not trying to keep you from pursuing your dream or creating something cool. They just want to qualify it to make sure that it's a good investment. It's a business. And in Canada specifically, since it's majority funding based, they need to be very careful of how they distribute those funds. So if someone comes with an idea and they've got new media, they've got a fake trailer or a short, and they've done all their writing and world building, and they're looking at that and someone that just sends in a one-page script, they're going to weigh the points and they're going to lean towards the safer investments. So always look at what you're doing as a business opportunity for the other person. And the closer you can get to making it a surefire investment, the closer you are to getting a confirmed production. And whatever you're doing, it's what everyone is doing. So independent producers, if I want to make a show and I make a pitch deck and I present it, I'm doing the exact same thing as a producer in New Brunswick, such as Connection Productions is doing. They make all sorts of television programs, and they need to create pitch decks and production Bibles to present to get funding. So it's kind of an equal playing ground in a way. Some people have more of a leg up than others, but it's all structured the same. Everyone wants funding, and the better you can present yourself to get that funding, then you're just as likely as anyone else. By the way, if you do have a project in mind, run it through Kat. She can help you apply for grants. She can give you advice on where to turn, on who to talk to. The Film Co-op is great. Highly recommend.
Peter Titus said he doesn't have anything to talk about yet, but he certainly will be coming to you someday. And then John Mundell said his bike's not working, but he's hoping to expand his short into a feature.
What's the stage of the short right now? Oh, cool. So use that short as part of your pitch material. Try to turn that into a trailer of sorts, because it usually gives you the opportunity to shrink the length even more and focus on the really strong parts of the short that are really going to sell your idea. And it alludes to a larger film. So taking a 10-minute short film, making a 1-minute trailer sells people on the idea of a 2-hour feature or an hour and a half, whatever. If it's your first feature, I don't recommend aiming for 2 hours. It's kind of difficult to get to that, but
yeah, can we talk about our idea now? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. You got an idea?
I feel we will interrupt the other people. That's why. Okay, I have an idea for serious. It's social about the dating app. And how it's the relation between the men and women. They are looking for each one looking for love. And the idea about three ladies from different background, different culture, and different age too. And when she's old, when young, when she's a poor, and
Mm-hmm.
the three ladies, they looking for love through different apps, and they working together, and they facing a lot of people they cheating, like people so this is my idea. I write the series. I have the six episode.
Okay.
But because I just moved to Fredericton here, I don't know. um, yeah, my background is from Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's this idea. I have the all treatment and all the series, but I don't know if this idea it will work or not. And I'm
Very
asking
well.
if someone can just help me to just look at the idea and just say, give me the guideline or something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is my question.
You can reach out to me. Kat has a few people at the Film Co-op who are also very talented with scripting and treatments. And I will say, if you feel that that idea might not work for this market, maybe just
Okay.
do a little research into the character types and their personas.
Okay.
For example, if one of your characters, the older one, is trying to use these dating apps, try to find someone in that age demographic that is experiencing the same thing and interview them. Gain
Yeah.
whatever insight that you can that's relevant. Just take a bunch of notes. And again, I don't recommend using final products out of an AI chat, but if you feed ChatGPT or something similar your existing treatments and all the notes that you gather from interviewing somebody or research that you get, or provide a comparable TV series,
Yeah.
put them all in and then ask for input. It can identify the things that you've written that you might not notice. It might be able to tell you areas you might need to polish up on, or gaps. It might say, hey, you might have forgot to mention this really interesting aspect, and just give you some ideas and direction. But yes, you
Okay.
can me or
Yeah.
Kat time for some direct insight.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Yeah, Seaham, I'm happy to help you because you're a co-op member. Like the co-op it is a membership-oriented place, so it does do we have a lot of resources, but we do a lot of mentorship, grant writing, as Kris mentioned, and just connecting people with other people who could help them.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Who else has content? I'm gonna keep fishing. I want to hear your ideas.
I have something very early stages production.
Those are the most interesting.
Well, like I call it early stage production, but I have a script written and a pitch deck document made, but it was the first pitch deck I've ever made, so I don't know if it's any good or not. So.
That really ultimately doesn't matter. You put it down on paper, you've started, you've got your brain vomit out, now you just keep refining it, and now you have this presentation document that you can use as a guideline. And I've provided 2 sample pitch decks that you can look at. The Monster Island pitch deck is more straightforward and traditional, so it has very concise section. Here's the characters, here's the story arc. But if you're really into your story, the Stranger Things pitch deck is really creative. There is a lot of writing and a lot of pages, which can be inundating, but if your story's good, like, I don't know if you guys have seen Stranger Things, but if you've got a good story on your hands, then make a 35-page pitch deck.
So my project is a feature. Would there be many differences between like a pitch deck for a series like Stranger Things versus like a 90-minute film? Like length, like the story arcs and stuff like there would be more extensive for a series, I would assume.
They can be, but when you're doing a series, you usually just focus on the first season, because you want to allude that there's more opportunity for further seasons and they're not nailed down, usually because distributors and producers have their own agendas and they want to expand on specific topics. So it's actually good to leave it a little open-ended for a TV series. But for film projects, like, you know, the full arc of your story and all the themes it's going to contain, put it all in the pitch deck. Go find some stock footage and create a sample trailer or make a phony logo. The more that you can show that you're both dedicated in your vision and are able to translate it from your brain into whatever format, the better. And also look at it as not the finality of it. So you just have a draft pitch deck for now. You can refine that, but then approach somebody you know is really talented in cinematography or directing and give it to them, get their insight, get them involved, then approach a producer like Connections or whoever else here in New Brunswick, get them attached. And as you're going, you're refining the pitch deck. And before you know it, you're going to have 3 or 4 versions that are really strong and refined. And you have a really cool, tight, succinct idea to bring to a distributor.
Thank you.
No problem. And I do recommend digging into music as much as you can. I find it's really helpful when you're looking at your pitch deck and your ideas. And at the end of the day, if you can pick a few of those songs out and include them in your pitch deck, like, you can embed a YouTube playlist or a Spotify playlist right into a PDF. I did a pitch deck a few years ago called Wolfville, and we took 6 songs that we thought would be anything from the theme song to included in the first episode. And it was hands down the biggest aspect that people commented on. Like, we really got into it. Like, we saw the visuals, but hearing it really put us into the story. Exactly, John. You should see my Spotify. There's a playlist for every idea that I've got. And it's not usually a normal thing to include them, but it's starting to become more of a commonality. Usually people, when they do their tone and comparables section, they'll mention in text form, they'll say, oh, there's going to be Celtic style music or hip hop or jazzy music. But reading that there's going to be jazz in your film doesn't really translate. So if you can have an audio clip or a link that someone can just click and it goes to a YouTube video, it all goes back to making it easy. The second somebody needs to go digging for something and they need to YouTube jazzy Celtic music, then you're starting to lose them. Do you have any more details on your project, Peter?
Yeah, it's a feature-length horror that sort of centers around a complicated father-son relationship where they're both estranged from each other. But the son gets drawn back to his small hometown that he left as a young child when his father is mysteriously poisoned. And throughout the story, the son is seeking answers as to the death of his mother that happened when he was a child. And we learn that there's a cult in town that is pulling the strings from the shadows, sort of.
I'm hooked already.
And it drew him back to town for their own nefarious purposes in order to complete a ritual that they started when he was a child before he left town. So that's kind of the
pretty good elevator pitch. The world building is there. I want to see the visuals and I want to know what this ritual looks like.
Well, that happens in the 3rd act.
I actually have another question for you, Kris.
Hit me.
So I guess I'll ask for both, just because I know there's some people also looking at some features. In terms of length, for like, say, like a 1-season series, if you were to kind of develop all of it just to kind of have for your pitch deck kind of thing, would like a 6, 8, 10 episode structure, kind of what is, like, in your experience, kind of the most, like, the length to shoot for that? And then same with like film, like what's kind of like the ideal selling length in terms of, like, do you want like an hour 30 out, like a crisp 90 minutes, an hour 45?
That almost directly plays into who you're trying to sell it to. So if it's the CBC, you want to fit into their scheduled programming. So it's, the 20, 30 minute TV episodes. But if you're going for the Netflixes and the Amazon Primes, you can do 40 minutes or an hour. If anyone's watching any of the new stuff coming out on Disney Plus, they have different length episodes for an entire season. Agatha All Along had a 20-minute episode and a 50-minute episode. So if you're going on a platform like Disney or Amazon, it doesn't really matter. But if you're trying to get it somewhere specific, like CBC, you kind of want to consider both their scheduling, their structure, and what your content falls under. So if it's family friendly and they can play earlier on in the day, maybe a direct comparable is Convenience for Yesterday's Weather, then you kind of want to format it in a similar way, because to them, the formula is comedy, this length, this time of day in the schedule. But if you've got swears and explicit content or blood and gore, it's later in the day so that you can kind of stretch it out a bit. It all depends on what people are shopping for. And you can find that out by doing research on the different productions and envelopes, which are the packages that the CMF and Telefilm are providing funding for. So you can sort of reverse engineer. But yes, for length, whatever suits your genre the most and your target. And in fact, you might even structure two different pitch decks for different people. So if you're approaching the CBC, create one that you think fits for them the best. Or if you want to get something into Adult Swim and you want to be a bit more on the nose with your comedy, then create one that's more raunchy and give it to them. Be flexible. Because this is just opening the door to a conversation, and sometimes they really want to give their input, or they just really like what you've got and they want to let you run with it. And as far as number of episodes, geez. If it's a streaming platform, it doesn't really matter too much. But if you're going for television, it depends on the time of year they plan on playing it. If the Olympics or, the NHL have anything scheduled.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you. This was a great presentation.
Appreciate it. Feel free to reach out anytime. If you're a member of the NB Film Co-op, I can provide some of my services to a certain extent for free. And support New Brunswick media. Join the Media NB Association too, as well. Get out there and get our film tax credit back to New Brunswick so we can start making movies here again.
Thank you, Kris.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thanks everyone. So I'm just going to sign off here shortly. Thanks for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.